The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
At the moment, anyway, the best father-son story that I remember is a true story. And this, I was listening to a baseball game, 1988. It was a playoff game, a pennant game between the New York Mets and the Los Angeles Dodgers. And it was toward the late innings of the game, so this happened one night, and then and I wasn't listening that night, or if I was, they didn't tell the story then, but they told this story a night or two later, and this is a wonderful father-son story. I like it especially well anyway. So there was a pitcher there, kind of a rookie pitcher, though experienced enough to play in the pennant race. He was a pitcher for the Dodgers, young man, and he was a pitcher, and he got up to in the bullpen to do some practice pitching before he was called up, and eventually he was called up. He was nervous as hell. Can I say hell? No. He was nervous as hell. And his pitches were wild. He just went everywhere except where he wanted to put them in the catcher's mitt. And as he was fretting, a song came into his head, and this is what he heard in his head. You take the high road, and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland before ye. And when that came to his mind, he settled down. His pitches came right where he wanted it to. And shortly he was called to come into and pitch as a relief pitcher in the closing innings. And he walked across that green grass, and he came up to the mound, took some practice pitchings. He was getting bad again. The pitches were going wild, and again it came to his mind: you take the high road, and I'll take the low road. And he settled down, and he pitched out of that inning, and he pitched the next inning, and the inning after that maybe, and they won, and he won the game. And he says, that's so wonderful. And what was sad about it to him was that his father hadn't lived long enough to see him pitching in a pennant race in the big leagues. His father would have just cried real tears if he'd seen that. But his father died when he was just a boy. So he went into the locker room with everybody, and they were all congratulating him on winning the game. And the phone rang, the locker room phone, and somebody answered it, and they called out, "Hey, Brian, it's long distance for you." So Brian went over to the phone. Hello? It was his mother. And his mother said, "Oh, Brian, honey," she said, "how wonderful to see my own boy up there pitching and on national television. Weren't you nervous?" He says, "Ma, I can't tell you how nervous I was, but when I was warming up," he said, "there was something that settled me down." He says, "This song came into my head. It was a song from out of nowhere. I don't know where it came from." She said, "What was the song?" He said, "Here, I'll sing it for you." It went, "You take the high road, and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland before ye." It was quiet. And then his mother said, "Brian, you've heard that song before." "No, Ma, I swear, I don't know where it came from." She said, "Honey, when you were just a baby, and your father would take you out in the baby buggy for a walk, and when you would begin to fret in the baby buggy, your father would sing you the only song he knew, the words to in all this world. Brian," she said, "tonight your father was singing you a lullaby. That's such a sweet and nice, yeah. And luckily I asked somebody if they had ever seen a baseball card of Brian, and they had, so I bought it.
Oh, good for
Yeah,
you.
nice. Blonde, he was a blonde-haired boy, and had a blonde mustache even. Never went much farther than that. Is not a household name except for me, and now you.
It's a true story that comes from this area. I learned about it initially from articles in the Times-Union, which is just next door to us here. And it's a personal story, but it's not my personal story. I call this the story of one American soldier. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. That is the oath that every U.S. Army soldier swears when they are enlisted. This is the story of one of those American soldiers. Not too long ago, in 1990, this American soldier and his family came to this country. He was only 8. When he was 16, 8 years later, he and his family went to a government building near Newburgh, New York, with a lot of other people. And they solemnly swore this oath. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by law, that I will perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by law, that I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by law, and that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God. Then they sang the Star-Spangled Banner, pledged allegiance to the flag, and proudly became naturalized American citizens. A few years later, when this young man graduated from high school, he said to his family, "I want to join the Army. I have special skills that Native Americans do not have, skills that the Army needs." But instead he went to college, as his father wanted him to. Then that horrific day, September 11th, 2001, happened. His sister later said, 9/11 made up his mind for him. He enlisted in the Army Reserve just 4 days after that happened. His unit was called up to serve as part of the invasion force into Iraq in 2003. While he was serving over there, he kept on getting comments from his fellow soldiers like, "What kind of last name is that?" Or, "Are Are you sure you're serving in the right army? When he told his brother and sister about this over the phone, they said, "Is it worth it, putting up with all that, mouth?" But he just said, "This is the only way I have to show how much I love this country." After 4 months of serving in Iraq, this American soldier, Mohsen Naqvi, got leave. And he came home secretly, just in time to celebrate the end of Ramadan. Now, Muslim families gather together to celebrate the end of Ramadan, the way other families gather together to celebrate Christmas or Passover. And you know how that goes. If a family member can't be there, they're called on the telephone. That's all his family expected, to be able to talk to him on the phone. But instead, he showed up. I think you can imagine their surprise and their sheer joy when he walked in the door. His father said, "This is the best holiday I've ever had." While home during that leave, Mohsen spoke to a reporter. He said, "It was pretty scary over there. My unit was under heavy mortar fire, so I had to sleep in my combat gear. But I knew that people in this community were praying for me." Maybe you've done that too. Prayed for someone in your community whom you may not even know personally, but prayed for their safety when they're in danger. And then he added, "You know, it's pretty hard getting used to running water again." Mohsen's family and friends said over and over again, Mohsen can make a joke about anything, even the worst situation. He's always the life of the party. When his leave was over, he went back to Iraq and served a total of 9 months there. Then he came home and finished his college degree. When he graduated from college, he signed up for the Army, the active service, once again reciting that oath. He told his family, "The Army is going to be my career. The only way I'm going to get out of the Army is if they throw me out, which isn't going to happen, or if I retire." In June of 2008, when he was 26, Mohsen married a young woman named Razia in a mosque in Colonie, New York, where she lived. That's a town right next to the town where I live. People said afterwards, Mohsen and Razia were so happy that day. They were smiling and laughing the entire time. A few days later, as had been scheduled earlier, Mohsen and his unit were deployed to Afghanistan. There he was going to use his special skills. As a native of Pakistan, he spoke Urdu, and as a Muslim, he spoke Arabic. And he could speak to the Afghans in those languages to reassure them about America's intentions in that country. Unfortunately, 3 months later, on September 17, 2008, First Lieutenant Mohsen Naqvi was killed by a roadside bomb. 3 other American soldiers were killed with him. Sergeant Joseph W. Harris, 21, of Romeoville, Illinois. Captain Bruce E. Hayes, 42, of Cheyenne, Wyoming. And Staff Sergeant Jason A. Vasquez, 24, of Chicago, Illinois. They were among the 155 U.S. soldiers who were killed in Afghanistan that year. Mohsen was buried with full military honors after a solemn service from that mosque where he had been married just 3 months earlier. After the 3 rifle volleys and the playing of taps, The flag covering his coffin was ceremoniously folded and presented to his 20-year-old widow, Raazia. Brigadier General William Phillips then presented Raazia with Mohsen's Purple Heart, his Bronze Star, his Combat Infantry Badge, and his dog tags. Brigadier General Phillips said, "Mohsen served his army with great distinction. He is a true patriot." Mohsen's father said, "We are patriotic Americans. We are proud to be Americans, but still people do not trust us. Why? Why is that? Why are we Muslims blamed for what 19 people did? Why? Why is that? My son was a patriotic American. He did his best, and now he's lying there under tons of dirt. What more can you ask from a patriotic American?" Mohsen's 18-year-old brother said, "Mohsen told me that he had to stay in the army because that was the only way he had as a Muslim to show how much he loved this country. I don't know anyone who loved this country more than Mohsen. Mohsen is my hero. I look up to him, and I hope everyone can do the same." The story of one American soldier, First Lieutenant Mohsen Naqvi.
One of the things about this particular season is that I think that stories just bubble up at this time of year. And this is one that actually happened to me in my role as a consultant. Before I was a storyteller, or before I realized I was really a storyteller, I was a healthcare consultant, and I did a lot of things for community health centers and governmental agencies and stuff. And I had just finished an assignment in downtown Washington on the 22nd of December. And it had gone well. I'd helped people work out a strategic plan on a fairly complicated issue, and it was going to have to continue, so there was more work coming in the new year. But right then, I had my little roller bag, and I was headed out of town, and I was coming home for Christmas. And I walked down the street to the Metro Center, and I got in, and I took the yellow line on the Metro, which eventually goes, without switching a train, right to National Airport. And I'd had all this pressure of the meeting and talking and stuff, and I got on that train, and I just sat down, and I sighed, and I stretched out my legs a little, and I shut my eyes, and I began to dream of home for Christmas. And all of a sudden I heard, "Nice socks." And I looked up, and there was a rather handsome guy in a camel hair top coat and a three-piece suit. And I said, well, thank you. Those are my Merry Christmas socks. And it had Bullwinkle the moose and, antlers with lights on it. And I said, my sister gave them to me for Christmas a couple years ago. I try to wear them every year at this time. And I'm just sitting here humming Christmas carols under my breath because I'm going home for Christmas. You mean like this? The first Noel, the angels did say, was to certain poor shepherds in fields where they lay, in fields where they lay keeping their sheep, on a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Well, me, being a little shy and retiring, I had sung along with my friend, my new friend, and I'd also started to conduct, just like I did for you. And I looked and smiled at people, and there's something about singing a Christmas carol. You can't sing it by yourself. people join in. And not only did the people immediately around us join in, but the whole car was singing that song at the end of it. It was just delightful. And my handsome friend in the three-piece suit, the sound of the first Noel hadn't left the car before he starts. It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old, with angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. The world in solemn splendor lay, to hear the angels sing. Well, we all got into that too. And then my friend turned to me and smiled. The car stopped, the doors opened. He said, "Merry Christmas," and he got out of the car. I turned back, I looked at the people in the car, and they looked at me like, okay, do something. So I thought for a minute, and I said, well, I could sing maybe, but you know, I'm more of a storyteller. So I have a little short story for you. Joseph and Mary were going down to Bethlehem, don't you know? And they're on this, Mary's riding the donkey, and it's dusty, and she's tired, and Joseph is leading the donkey, and he's tired and dusty, and the donkey's tired and dusty. And she says to Joseph, she says, Joseph, Joseph, tell me one more time, why are we going all the way to Bethlehem to have this baby? And Joseph says, that's the only place the HMO is going to cover the delivery. Oh, well, actually, some of the people did laugh in the car. Now, all this time, when this had been all going on, there was one guy right across from me who just sat there. And he was kind of maybe not aware of it. Or maybe he was just mad. I don't know. But right after that half laughter, he looks at me and said, what was that stop? And I said, well, I think that was Pentagon City. Oh, I wanted to get off at Pentagon City. Well, I'm sorry, you know, you can just get off and get back. Oh, you and your songs and your jokes. Why? Oh, you just made me miss my stop. And he was bustling and fussing, and everybody, you know, he kind of killed the atmosphere, to be quite honest. And the car stops, and it's Crystal City, so he can get off and just take one quick stop back. And as he turns at the door, he looks around, breaks into a smile, and says, oh, and by the way, Merry Christmas. So we said, Merry Christmas. And the bubble up had even touched the angry man on the metro. Now, right after that stop, the train comes out of underground and pops up, and there's the airport. So I was just excited that he had kind of cheered himself up. So I started dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh, o'er the fields we go, laughing all the way. Bells on bobtail ring, making spirit bright. What fun it is to ride and sing a sleigh song tonight. Oh, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Well, everybody joined in with really great enthusiasm, and we pulled into the national airport stop, and I got my little wheelie bag, and I turned and I said, Merry Christmas. And a couple people went, Merry Christmas, and they started, and I got out, I said, what was that all about? I mean, I was the choral director of the Yellow Line here for 10 minutes, and I don't get but a little, but as I was watching the train go, I noticed that a guy 2 seats up from me was going, and I heard, oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant, come. And that sound, that Christmas carol, was soon out of my active hearing, but still in my heart. You see, when the community gets going, it can continue on its own. You can get new leaders. The story can carry on and continue on the way while you, as early vocalists, might go on to other matters of heart. And so I turned with my wheelie bag, got my boarding pass, got on the plane, and went home for Christmas.
A story that comes from the Indian tradition. It's about Krishna. And as many people know, Krishna came to Earth as a human baby, much like Jesus.
That's right.
There's other stories that tell of deities coming to Earth as human babies and growing up. So Krishna was one of those. And when he was living on Earth with his family, his mother is Yashoda and his brother is Balarama. And just like any big brother, Balarama did not like Krishna trailing along with him and his friends. And of course, just like any mother, Yashoda needed time and would say to Balarama, "Watch your baby brother." So of course, this created a lot of problems for Balarama and his friends. So one day, Balarama and his friends found a tree. And this tree, in some stories, was a plum tree, full of the ripe plums, those purple fruit, so sweet and delicious. And Balarama and his friends, with Krishna trailing behind, decided that they would pick the plums. Of course, Krishna was too young to climb the tree, but the bigger boys climbed up to the tree as high as they could go, and they started eating the plums. But soon they were full, and they decided that they would save some. They would bring them home, and they started to throw the plums down on the ground. Well, there was baby Krishna receiving this wealth of plums, and he started to eat them as fast as he could. In one story I read that told me this, the tale of Krishna and Balarama, he was shoving them in his mouth, his hands working like pistons. And soon his face was all sticky from the juice of the fruit, and his mouth was full of it. But while he was picking up those plums, he was also picking up dirt and shoving dirt in his mouth. He was a baby. Babies do that. And pretty soon Balarama and his friends saw what baby Krishna was doing, eating their bounty. And they said, "Krishna, stop eating our plums." No, he was shoving them in his mouth as fast as he could. Well, they started calling for Yashoda. "Yashoda, come and get your baby." And then Balarama knew what to say. "Yashoda, come and get your baby. He's eating dirt." There's nothing to get a mother out of the house faster than to find out that her baby is eating dirt. Well, out she came and she grabbed Krishna and she said, "Krishna, have you been eating dirt?" "No," he says, "I haven't been eating any dirt." He shook his head. And like many mothers do, she opened his mouth. She pried his mouth open to see what was in there. And when he opened his mouth, Yashoda looked in to see the dirt. But instead, she saw the sun and the moon and the stars and all the planets revolving around the sun, including the earth. And on the earth, she could see India. She could see herself. She could see the baby, Krishna, in her arms with his mouth open. And she looked in that mouth. And in that mouth, she saw again the universe swirling around. And she became dizzy. She said, Yashoda said, "Krishna, close your mouth." And he did. She looked at this baby in her arms. Who was he? Why was she worried about a little bit of dirt when he held the entire universe in his mouth? And she held him close to her breast, and she walked into the house, leaving Balarama and his friends to watch this. What adults? You can't explain them. And that's the story of Krishna, who holds the universe in his mouth, as all babies do. Don't they?
Oh, wow.
Don't they?
Isn't that a great story? I have a good friend from Colgate who's a lawyer in Boston, and his name is Tom O'Hare. And the O'Hares that he's part of come from County Clare, just south of Galway. And years ago, he developed a relationship with some guys who bought a house in Galway, and they each get 3 weeks a year. And so Gay and I were privileged with some other folks from college to go spend a week in Galway with Tommy O, or as we call him, Rabbit. At any rate, And he was a baritone, and he's got a great voice, and he plays the concertina and the guitar. And I'm not going to tell you all the stories about going to the pub every night with Tommy and being introduced as the other Yank and all the other things that go on in pubs in Ireland, because those you should experience for yourself. But on the third day we were there, we get up and we're sitting at the kitchen table, and Tom goes to the window and he looks out. He says, "Oh, this is shaping up to be a very fine, soft day." And I looked out the window, and it's raining, slowly, gray, just ugh. And I said, "Rabbit, you had a little bit too much Jameson's last night because your eyes are confounding you." And he says, No, you don't understand. I says, "I do understand. I know when it's going to be a not very fine, soft day." "No, you don't. You've not spent time here before, Joe." He says, and I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, let's give it a bit." He says, I say, "Be ready to go about 10:15. We'll leave then, and then I'll describe what's going to happen as we go." So I get my umbrella and my raincoat, and I'm ready by the door, and off we go. And it's misty. It's not raining as hard as it had been when he first looked out the window. We walk about 2 blocks, and we get to the road and the stone wall that lines the harbor. And he says, "Look up there." And I look up, and there's a little patch of blue sky. He says, "Now, if we walk slow, by the time we get to the quay, there'll be sun on it." I says, "You're full." And he says, "No, you won't need your umbrella, and you'll be wishing you didn't have to lug around your raincoat." So we walk 3 more blocks, and the sun is shining on the quay. And he says, "Now we're going to go all the way to the other end of the harbor, and we'll walk back. And just for your insolence," he says, "we're going to sit outside over at the pub, and we're going to have a cup of coffee just before we have lunch." And we did. And I now understand. When an Irish person says it's going to be a fine, very soft day, believe them.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.